I was abandoned by my own son in -20-degree cold. He looked straight into my eyes and said, "I can't take care of you anymore. You're a burden." He said that even though just 6 months earlier I had sold my only house to pay off his debts. The freezing cold outside cut into my skin, but it was nothing compared to the pain in my heart. With nowhere left to go, I wandered through the neighborhood until I found a rusted, abandoned boxcar. I crawled inside just to survive another day. I collected bottles and scrap to patch the holes in that boxcar. People around me laughed, saying I fit perfectly among the junk and rust. They had no idea that just a few weeks later, this very rust would save their lives. Thank you for being here and staying with this story. Before we continue, I'd really love to know, where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments so we can connect. Also, please note, this story includes a few fictional elements added for storytelling and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real people or settings is purely coincidental, but the message I'm sharing is meant to be meaningful and helpful. I was sitting in his living room, or what used to feel like our living room, when I first moved in 6 months ago. The leather couch beneath me had worn smooth in places, and I'd been staring at those spots for the better part of an hour, trying to make myself invisible. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the furnace and the occasional creak of frozen wood settling in the cold outside. 6 months. That's how long I'd been living in Trevor's spare bedroom ever since I sold my house to pay off his gambling debts. The kind of debts that don't come with payment plans, they come with threats. I'd signed over the deed to my paid-off 3-bedroom ranch, the house where Trevor grew up, where his mother and I had raised him. Walked away with nothing but the promise that I could stay with him until I got back on my feet. That promise had an expiration date. I just hadn't realized tonight was it. I'd learned to recognize the signs. The way Trevor's jaw tightened when he came through the door. The way Brittany's eyes would flick toward me with that look, the one that said I was taking up space that didn't belong to me. Trevor's truck pulled into the driveway at 8:15. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of Brittany in the passenger seat, her phone screen lighting up her face. She was his girlfriend, 28 years old, moved in 3 months ago, worked at some marketing firm, and made sure everyone knew she was going places. Places that apparently didn't include a 65-year-old man sleeping in the spare bedroom. The front door opened, bringing in a gust of air so cold it made my lungs ache. "Bad sound," Trevor said. Just that. Not "Hey Dad" or "Evening." Just my title, flat and heavy. "Evening, son," I replied. "There's leftover meatloaf in the... We need to talk." He didn't take off his coat. That's when I knew. Brittany came in behind him, stomping snow off her boots. "Baby," she said, touching Trevor's arm with her red-painted nails. "Let's discuss this in the bedroom first." They disappeared down the hallway. I could hear the murmur of voices through the walls, hers urgent and insistent, his lower and reluctant. I've been a mechanical engineer for 40 years. I understand pressure points and stress loads. I could hear both in that conversation. When Trevor came back out 5 minutes later, his face had changed. The reluctance was gone, replaced by something harder. "Dad, we need to talk," he said again, standing in the middle of the living room like he was trying to maintain distance. I set down the magazine I hadn't been reading. "All right, Brittany and we can't afford to keep you here anymore." The words landed like stones in still water. I felt them sink. "Son, I don't eat much," I said, hearing the pleading edge in my voice and hating it. "I can help with the bills. I've got my Social Security check coming, and I can find work." "You're 65 years old." He said it like it was a disease. "I'm capable. You're a burden." The word came out sharp. Final. Dead weight. "I'm sorry, but that's just how it is. You need to leave. Tonight." I stood up slowly. My knees cracked, they always did in the cold, and for a moment I saw something flicker across Trevor's face. Discomfort, maybe. Or guilt. It was gone before I could name it. Trevor talked, I said carefully. It's 20 below out there. Can't this wait until morning? Tut no. Brittany had appeared in the hallway, arms crossed. We've talked about this. We need our space. I'd sold my house to save my son from people who don't send collection letters. 6 months of making myself small, of skipping meals, of pretending I didn't hear them arguing about me through the walls. I tried again, looking past Brittany to Trevor. Please, I gave up my home for you. And I appreciated it, Dad. I really did. But that was 6 months ago. You've got 10 minutes to get your things. 10 minutes, Trevor, all my clothes, my... whatever you can carry. There was no room for negotiation in his voice. This was it. I went to the spare bedroom. It took me 4 minutes to gather what I could. My heavy coat, 2 changes of clothes, shoved into a duffel bag my wife had bought me 20 years ago, my reading glasses. I reached for the photo album on the nightstand, pictures of Trevor as a baby, his mother holding him, but my hands were shaking too hard. When I came back out, Trevor was holding the front door open. Cold air poured in like water through a broken dam. I'm sorry, he said, not meeting my eyes. This is just how it has to be. I walked past him onto the porch. The cold hit me like a physical force. Behind me, I heard Brittany say, "Finally, now we can turn that room into my office." The door slammed shut with such force I felt it in my chest. The sound echoed across the frozen yard like a gunshot. Sharp, final. The kind of sound that separates one life from another. I stood there, my breath coming out in white clouds. Through the window, I could see Trevor's silhouette. He stood motionless for a moment, then reached up and pulled the curtain closed. The porch light clicked off. As I walked down the steps, my boots crunching in frozen snow, something hit me harder than the cold. A memory sudden and sharp. Trevor at 5 years old, wobbling on his first two-wheeler in the driveway of the house I'd just sold to save him. Me running alongside, one hand on the seat. "I got you, buddy," I'd said. "I won't let go, I promise." And I hadn't. Not until he was ready. Now here I was, 65 years old, standing in 20 below weather, and my son had let go. No, that wasn't right. My son had pushed. I stood there in the snow, my breath freezing in the air, and realized something terrible. I had nowhere to go. No money. I'd given Trevor everything when I sold the house, and he'd been managing my Social Security checks, said he'd put them toward rent and groceries. No plan. No friends in this town I'd moved to, just to be near my son. Just the clothes on my back, the bag in my hand, and the cold that was already seeping into my bones. They say the human body shuts down after about 3 hours at 20 below zero. I had maybe 2 hours before I started losing fingers. 4 before I lost consciousness. I needed shelter. Fast. I started walking. The snow crunched under my boots with each step, a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the silent December night. My breath froze in the air before my face crystallizing into tiny particles that caught the streetlight. I pulled my coat tighter, but the cold had already worked its way through the fabric, through my shirt, into my skin. 29 below Celsius. -20 Fahrenheit. Either way you measured it, it was the kind of cold that killed people. My engineering mind kicked in, automatically calculating survival parameters, even as my heart was still processing what had just happened. Body heat loss rate in sub-zero conditions. Wind chill factor with 10-mile-per-hour gusts. Time until hypothermia onset. The numbers marched through my head like soldiers, cold and precise and terrifying. I had to find somewhere warm. Somewhere that would take in a 65-year-old man with no money and nowhere else to go. The church was 3 blocks away. I could see its white steeple rising against the dark sky, topped with a cross that caught the moonlight. Reverend Joseph Clark had preached there for 15 years. I'd attended services there when my wife was still alive, back when Trevor was small, and we were still a family. But I kept walking past it. I don't know if it was pride or shame, or just the certainty that the Reverend would look at me with that particular expression, the one that said he was judging my failures while pretending to offer grace. The church helped people, I knew that, but it helped the right kind of people, the deserving poor, not old men who'd somehow managed to lose everything, including their son's love. My fingers were going numb. I flexed them inside my gloves, trying to keep the blood flowing. The duffel bag pulled at my shoulder heavier with each step. The motel was another block down. The Ponderosa Inn, a squat building with a flickering neon sign that read VA_ANCY. I'd driven past it 1,000 times, never imagining I'd be desperate enough to consider it. I stopped at the entrance, looking through the glass door at the small lobby. $30 a night, according to the sign. $30 I didn't have. I kept walking. Grace Coleman's grocery store was dark, but I could see a light on in the apartment above it. Grace was about my age, a widow who'd run that store for 20 years. She knew everyone in town. She'd known my wife. She'd known Trevor as a boy. I stood on the sidewalk across the street looking up at that light. All I had to do was cross the street, knock on her door, explain my situation. Grace was kind. She would help, but the shame was a physical thing now, as cold and heavy as the air around me. To knock on that door would be to admit out loud what had happened. To say the words, "My son threw me out. I have nothing. I need help." I couldn't do it, so I turned away from Grace's light and kept walking toward the edge of town, where the streetlights ended and the railroad yards began. My face had gone numb now. I couldn't feel my cheeks or my nose. My ears burned with a cold so intense it felt like fire. Each breath was painful, the frozen air searing my lungs. The engineering part of my brain was still working, still calculating. I'd been walking for 40 minutes now. At this temperature, with this wind chill, I had maybe 90 minutes left before real damage started. Before frostbite became inevitable. Before my body began the irreversible shutdown that ended in death. I needed shelter, not in an hour, now. The railroad yard sprawled before me, a maze of tracks and equipment silhouetted against the night sky. In the summer, it bustled with activity, freight trains, loading and unloading workers, shouting machinery, clanging. But now, in the dead of winter, at 9 o'clock at night, it was empty and silent. I saw the dim glow first, a single security light, casting a weak orange pool across the snow. Then I saw the shapes, old boxcars lined up on forgotten sidings covered in rust and graffiti. Decommissioned equipment, abandoned, forgotten, just like me. I'd spent 40 years as a mechanical engineer. I'd designed ventilation systems, calculated load-bearing capacities, built things that lasted. But that night, I became something else, an old man breaking into an abandoned boxcar to survive. The metal was so cold, it burned when I touched it. I stood at the edge of the boxcar, one hand pressed against the steel frame, trying to catch my breath. My legs shook from exhaustion and cold. The walk from Trevor's house to this forgotten corner of the rail yard had taken everything I had left. But I was here, and I was still alive. I forced myself to look at the boxcar with an engineer's eye, not a desperate man's hope. Steel frame, good. Wooden slat walls with gaps between them, not ideal but workable. The Union Pacific logo was faded almost to invisibility, which meant this car had been decommissioned years ago, maybe decades. The sliding door was partially open, maybe 2 feet. I grabbed the handle and pulled. Nothing. I pulled harder, leaning back with all my weight. The door groaned, but didn't move. Rust had welded it to the frame. Ice had filled the track it ran on. "Come on," I whispered through numb lips. "Come on." I planted my feet in the snow, gripped the handle with both hands, and pulled with everything I had left. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a shriek of protesting metal that seemed loud enough to wake the entire town, the door jerked 6 inches along its track. I rested, breathing hard, my breath forming clouds in the freezing air. 6 inches wasn't enough. A man my size couldn't fit through 6 inches. I pulled again. This time the door moved more easily, screaming along its frozen track, until the opening was wide enough for me to squeeze through. I stood there for a moment, looking into the absolute darkness inside. The opening felt like a mouth ready to swallow me whole. But I was out of options, and out of time. I grabbed my duffel bag and climbed inside. The darkness was complete. Not the normal darkness of a room at night, but the kind of darkness that exists in sealed spaces where no light has penetrated in years. It felt almost solid, pressing against my eyes. The smell hit me next. Old wood. Rust. Something musty and ancient. But underneath that, and this was what mattered, I smelled nothing organic. No animal waste. No decomposition. No sign that anything living had used this space recently. That was good. I fumbled in my coat pocket for the box of matches I'd grabbed from Trevor's kitchen, one of the few things I'd managed to take when he gave me 10 minutes to leave. My fingers were so numb I almost dropped the box. On the third try, I got one out and struck it against the side. The tiny flame flared to life, impossibly bright, after the absolute darkness. I held it up, turning slowly, taking in my new home. The boxcar was maybe 30 feet long, 8 feet wide. The floor was wooden dirty, but solid. The walls were steel with wooden slats, gaps between them, where I could see strips of night sky. Snow had drifted in through those gaps near the door, but the far end looked dry. The ceiling was intact. That was the most important thing. I could see rust spots where moisture had gotten in over the years, but there was no active leak. No snow on the floor in the back meant the roof was holding. The walls would block the wind. The roof would keep off the snow. With the door partially closed, the space would hold some body heat. I could survive here. Maybe not comfortably, maybe not for long, but I could survive tonight. The match burned down to my fingers, and I dropped it, letting darkness rush back in. I made my way carefully toward the back corner, the driest and most protected spot, my feet shuffling across the wooden floor. I sat down with my back against the cold metal wall, pulled my duffel bag close, and wrapped my arms around myself. My body shook uncontrollably now that I'd stopped moving, but I was out of the wind. The temperature inside the boxcar was still far below freezing, but it was maybe 10 degrees warmer than outside. 10 degrees that might be the difference between life and death. I closed my eyes, though it made no difference in the darkness. My mind kept replaying the evening, Trevor's face cold and certain. Brittany's voice, "We need that room." The sound of the door locking behind me. The long walk through the freezing night. The desperate search for somewhere, anywhere that would take me in. And now here I was. 65 years old, sitting in an abandoned boxcar in the middle of winter. No money, no home, nothing but the clothes on my back and a duffel bag with 2 changes of clothes and a photo album. But I was alive. I sat there in the darkness, back against the frigid wall, and made myself a promise I would not die here. I would survive this, and somehow, some way I would prove that I wasn't worthless. I didn't know how yet. I just knew I had to try. The cold pressed in around me, and I pulled my coat tighter, settling in for what would be the longest night of my life. I woke to frost on my eyebrows. That's what I remember most. Not the cold, though God knows it was cold. Not the hunger or the fear. Just that frost. Tiny crystals that crunched when I touched them. Proof that my body had been warm enough through the night to create condensation, to make moisture, to stay alive. Small victories, right? That's what you learn to celebrate when everything else is gone. The sun was just starting to come up. These thin strips of light gray, really more gray than gold, they were sneaking through the gaps in the walls. And I could finally see where I was. What I'd gotten myself into. I didn't move right away. Couldn't actually. Every part of me hurt. But I did what I always do, what 40 years as an engineer taught me to do. I took inventory. Fingers. I wiggled them. They moved. Hurt like hell, but they moved. Toes. Same thing. Burning, aching, but there. All 10 of them as far as I could tell. I'd made it. One night down. Listen, I know how that sounds. One night. Like it's nothing. But when you're 65 years old, sitting in an abandoned boxcar at 20 below one night it's everything. I stood up slowly because fast wasn't an option, and I really looked at the place. In the matchlight the night before, I'd seen the basics. Steel frame, wooden walls, roof intact. But now with daylight I could see the problems. Those gaps between the wall slats. Wind was pouring through them. I could feel it on my face, my hands. Every bit of warmth my body tried to make just disappeared through those gaps. I needed to fix that. I pulled out my notebook. Yeah, I had a notebook. Always did. You don't survive 4 decades in mechanical engineering without writing things down. And I made a list, not a fancy one, just priorities. 1, insulation. Seal the gaps. Keep the wind out. 2, heat. Fire somehow. Without burning down my new home or killing myself with smoke. 3, water. You can go weeks without food. Days without water. Maybe less when it's this cold. 4, food, eventually, but not today. I stared at that list. Then at the empty boxcar. Then back at the list. No materials, no tools, no money. But I knew where to find what I needed. The dump was about a mile out. Maybe a little more. So I grabbed my bag empty except for that photo album, the one thing I couldn't leave behind, and I started walking. The snow was... Jesus, it was deep. Knee-deep in places. Every step was work. Real work. Lift your foot high, push through the drift plant, do it again. Over and over. But the sun was coming up proper now. Brilliant. Cold as hell, but brilliant. The whole world was white and gold and so bright it hurt to look at. 40 minutes. That's how long it took me to get there. The dump stretched out forever, piles of furniture nobody wanted anymore. Old appliances, construction, debris, bags of garbage frozen solid. Most people would see trash. I saw possibilities. I started looking. Systematic. That's the word, right? I worked through it, section by section. Burlap sacks torn up dirty, but they'd work for insulation. Newspapers wet at the edges, but mostly good. Paper's excellent insulation if you layer it right. Tin cans. Fabric scraps. Pieces of cardboard. I was pulling this big piece of canvas out from under a pile when I heard footsteps. Digging through trash now, Edgar. I turned around. Some guy from town. I knew his face but couldn't remember his name. He was standing there in his nice, clean coat, looking at me like I was, I don't know, something disgusting he'd stepped in. That's pretty pathetic, he said. I could have explained myself. Could have told him I was solving a problem, being resourceful, doing what engineers do. But you know what? I didn't owe him that. Didn't owe him anything. So I turned back to the canvas and kept pulling. He stood there a few more seconds. Then he walked off, muttering something. I didn't catch it. Didn't care to. I kept working. By the time I was done, I had quite a pile. The canvas nearly intact turned out. More newspapers. Those burlap sacks. Tin cans I could use for water. And then here's the thing. Buried under a stack of broken pallets, I found a cast iron pot. About a gallon, I'd say. Had a crack in the bottom. Small one. But I could fix that. I knew I could. I loaded up my bag and made a sling for the rest. Everything I could carry. The walk back was going to be brutal with all this weight, but I had what I needed. Materials to seal those gaps. Paper to start fires. That pot for melting snow. I had the tools to survive. I was maybe halfway back struggling through this ridiculous drift. Probably looked like an idiot when I heard it. This sound, soft, weak, a whimper. I stopped, listened. There, again. Something alive. behind that pile of pallets. I put down my stuff and walked over slow, my boots making this crunching sound in the snow that seemed way too loud. Behind the pallets in this little hollow where the wind couldn't quite reach, I saw it. Something small, something hurt, something that needed help just as much as I did. He wasn't much to look at. Matted yellow fur, one ear torn hanging at this weird angle, ribs showing through the dirt and grime like bars on a cage. But when those brown eyes looked up at me, really looked at me, I saw something I hadn't seen in days. Trust, or maybe hope. I don't know. Same thing, probably. I set down the stuff I'd been carrying, the canvas, the newspapers, all of it, and I moved slow. Real slow. Because scared animals, they bite, and I didn't need that on top of everything else. "Hey there, buddy," I said, kept my voice quiet, gentle. "You're in pretty rough shape, huh?" "Yeah, me too." The dog, because that's what it was under all that filth, let out this weak little bark. More of a cough, really. His tail twitched. Not wagging, just twitched. I crouched down still a few feet away, held out my hand, palm up. Let him get my scent, he sniffed. Cautious. Those eyes never left my face. "I'm not gonna hurt you," I said. And then I thought, Jesus, Edgar, you're talking to a dog. But you know what? It felt good to talk to something. Even if that something couldn't answer back. I reached into my coat pocket. Habit, really. And I felt it, half a piece of bread. Stale as hell, been in there since before Trevor threw me out. The last food I'd taken from that house. I looked at it, looked at the dog, looked back at the bread. My stomach was empty, had been for over a day. But this dog, he was dying. I could see it in those ribs, in the way he shook. "So here," I said, breaking off a piece. "You need this more than I do." I tossed it to him. He flinched when it landed, like he thought it might hurt him. Then he sniffed it. Once. Twice. He ate it so fast, I barely saw his mouth move. I tossed him another piece, and another, until the bread was gone. Then he did something I wasn't expecting. He crawled forward just a few inches, but forward, and he licked my hand. Once. Quick. Like he was testing whether I was real. "Yeah," I said. My throat felt tight. "Yeah, okay. You can come with me." I mean, what else was I gonna do? Leave him there to freeze, to starve? We were in the same boat, him and me. Both thrown away. Both trying to survive. Come on," I said, standing up. "Let's get you somewhere warm." He followed me, hesitant. Limping on his back left leg, I hadn't noticed that before. But he followed. The walk back to the boxcar took forever. I had to stop every few minutes because the dog, Rusty, I started calling him in my head because of that yellowish fur, couldn't keep up. But he kept trying. That's what got me. He kept trying. When we got to the boxcar, I lifted him inside first. He was so light. Couldn't have been more than 30 pounds. Should have been 50 at least. I climbed in after him with all my scavenged materials. Rusty stood in the middle of the space looking around, his nose working overtime, taking in all the smells. I used some of the fabric scraps to make him a bed. Nothing fancy, just softer than bare wood. Warmer. "There," I said. "That's yours." He circled it 3 times, like dogs do, I guess. And then he lay down. Let out this long sigh. The kind that says I'm tired all the way to my bones. I worked on insulating the walls while he slept, stuffing newspaper into the gaps, layering the burlap sacks. Not perfect, not even close, but better. The sun was going down by the time I finished. The temperature was dropping. Fast. I settled into my corner with my coat wrapped tight around me. My stomach was growling something fierce now. That bread, giving it away, had seemed right at the time. But now, Rusty lifted his head, looked at me. Then he got up slow, careful, and he walked over to where I was sitting. He pressed himself against my side, his body warm, alive. "Thanks, buddy," I whispered. That night, with Rusty curled up next to me, sharing body heat, I slept better than I had in weeks. Even in Trevor's house, I hadn't slept that well, because there I'd been alone. Really alone. But now I had company. I woke up once, middle of the night. Rusty's breathing was steady against me, and I thought for the first time since Trevor locked that door, I'm not completely alone anymore. That thought let me fall back asleep. When I woke up again, it was to a sound that made my blood run cold. Footsteps, outside the boxcar. Heavy boots, deliberate, official. The footsteps of someone with authority. Carl Henderson wasn't a bad man. He was just doing his job. But when he told me I had 48 hours to leave or pay $7 a week, he might as well have handed me a death sentence. The knock came at dawn. Not gentle, not tentative. The kind of knock that says I have authority and I'm using it. I jolted awake. Rusty was already on his feet, that low growl rumbling in his chest. For a second, just a second, I thought maybe Trevor had come back. Maybe he'd changed his mind, but no. The voice that came through the metal was unfamiliar. "Hello, anyone in there? This is railroad property." My heart was hammering. Railroad property? Right. Of course it was. I hadn't thought about that part. Or maybe I had, and I'd ignored it because what choice did I have? I stood up, every joint aching from another night on that hard floor. "Just a minute," I called out. Rusty looked at me. I looked at him. "Stay one," I said quietly. "Good boy, stay." I slid the door open, maybe a foot. Just enough to see who was out there. A man. Mid-40s, I'd guess. Railroad uniform, the kind with the company logo stitched on the chest. Clipboard in one hand. Flashlight in the other, even though the sun was coming up. Behind him, I could see his truck parked on the access road. "Morning," he said. Not unkind, just official. "I'm Carl Henderson, railroad inspector. And you are..." "Edgar," I said. Didn't give him my last name. Don't know why. "Edgar Brennan." "Mr. Brennan." He nodded. Looked past me into the boxcar. "Mind if I ask what you're doing in there?" I could have lied. Could have said I was just passing through, fell asleep, didn't mean anything by it. But I was tired. So damn tired. And I didn't have the energy for lies. I'm going through some difficulties," I said. Kept my voice steady. Didn't mention Trevor. Didn't mention any of it. I needed somewhere to stay, temporarily. Carl's expression didn't change much. He'd probably heard stories like mine before, or worse. "I see," he said. He glanced past me again. This time his eyes caught on something, the newspapers I'd stuffed in the wall gaps probably. The burlap sacks. "You've been doing some work in there." "Yes, sir." What else could I say? He wrote something on his clipboard. Then he looked back at me. "Mr. Brennan, I understand you're in a tough spot." "I do. But this is railroad property. Specifically, it belongs to Northern Montana Rail. And you're trespassing." There it was. The word I'd been waiting for. Trespassing. I nodded. Didn't argue. Because he was right. "Now," Carl continued, "I could call the sheriff right now. Have you removed?" "But..." He paused. Looked at me closer. At my worn coat, my hollow cheeks. "But I'm not going to do that." Something in my chest loosened. Just a little. "You've got two options," he said. "You can leave within 48 hours, pack up, move on, and we'll consider this matter closed. Or..." He checked his clipboard. "You can pay rent. $7 a week. $7. I stared at him. $7 might as well have been 700. 7,000. I don't have that right now," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Small, Carl nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer. Then I'm sorry, Mr. Brennan, but you'll need to leave. 48 hours. That's the regulation. 48 hours. 2 days. Back out into the cold. Back to… what? The church basement. The streets. Another abandoned building until someone kicked me out of that one, too. I understand, I heard myself say. Carl tucked his pen behind his ear, started to turn away. Then he stopped. That insulation work, he said, nodding toward the boxcar. That's good craftsmanship. Most people wouldn't know how to do that properly. Keep the heat in without creating a condensation problem. I blinked. I was an engineer, mechanical engineer. Yeah, and something shifted in his face. Not quite respect, but recognition, maybe. Well, you did good work. He walked back to his truck. I watched him go. Watched him drive away down the access road until the truck disappeared around the curve. Then I turned and looked at the boxcar. My home. For 2 more days, anyway. Rusty was sitting in the doorway, head tilted, watching me. It's okay, boy, I said, but my voice cracked a little. I climbed back inside and sat down. My mind was spinning. $7 a week. How was I supposed to come up with $7 a week? I had no job, no prospects, no one who would hire a 65-year-old man who smelled like a railroad yard and slept in a boxcar. But if I didn't find a way, if I couldn't come up with that money, I'd be back out in the cold. And this time I might not survive it. I looked down at my hands. These hands that had designed complex machinery, that had held my wife when she was dying, that had taught my son to ride a bike. These hands that had built a whole career, a whole life. And now they had to figure out how to earn $7 a week. If they couldn't, I'd be right back where I started, out in that killing cold. Only this time I'd have Rusty to worry about too. The dog pressed against my leg. Warm. Trusting. We'll figure it out, I told him. I just didn't know how yet. Pride is a luxury you can't afford when you're hungry. I learned that the day I stood outside Grace Coleman's grocery store and tried to work up the courage to go inside and ask for work. Any work. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes. Just stood there. Looking at the door. Looking at my boots. Looking at the door again. People walked past me. Some I recognized. Some didn't. A few nodded. Most didn't. And I thought, this is what I've become. An old man loitering outside a grocery store trying to decide if he's brave enough to beg for a job. Not brave. That's not the word. Desperate. That's the word. I pushed the door open. The bell above it rang one of those cheerful little chimes that's supposed to make you feel welcome. It made me feel like everyone in the store was looking at me. And maybe they were. Or maybe that was just in my head. Grace Coleman was behind the counter. Mid-50s, I'd guess. Gray hair pulled back in a practical bun. Glasses on a chain around her neck. She looked up when I came in. Edgar Brennan, she said. Not a question. Just recognition. Mrs. Coleman. My throat was dry. I was wondering if you might have any work I could do. Repairs, hauling, anything. I'm in a difficult situation right now. She studied me. Not unkindly. Just assessing. The way you might look at a piece of furniture you're thinking about buying. What I heard, she said finally, that you're staying in that old boxcar, out by the rail yard. No point lying. Small town, people talk. Yes, ma'am, I said. Temporarily. Her expression softened a little. Not pity. Something else. Understanding, maybe. I've got some shelving in the back that needs fixing, she said. Been meaning to get to it for weeks, and the back door hinge is broken, won't close properly. You able to handle that kind of work? Yes, ma'am. Relief flooded through me, made my knees weak. I can do that. She nodded. Tools are in the storage room. Help yourself. I worked for the next 4 hours, maybe 5. Lost track of time. The shelves first. They were sagging in the middle, too much weight, not enough support. Basic engineering problem. I reinforced the brackets, redistributed the load. Took about an hour. The door hinge was trickier. Rusted through. I couldn't replace it, didn't have the parts, but I could jury-rig something that would hold. Used some wire, a piece of scrap metal I found in the alley. Not pretty, but functional. Then I reorganized the back storage room. Hadn't been asked to. Just did it. Grouped items by category. Heavier things on bottom shelves. Made sense. Grace came back to check on me around 6 o'clock. The light outside was starting to fade. She looked at the shelves. The door. The storage room. "Well," she said, "you do good work, Mr. Brennan." "Thank you, ma'am." She pulled out her wallet, counted out 3 $1 bills, held them out to me. $3. I took them. Felt the paper between my fingers. $3. Still needed 4 more to make 7. But 3 was... It was something. It was hope. "And this," Grace said. She handed me a paper bag full of groceries, bread, cheese, some canned goods, an apple. I started to protest. "Mrs. Coleman, I can't..." "They're past their sell date," she said, matter of fact. I was going to throw them out anyway. I looked at the apple. It was perfect. Not a bruise on it. Looked at the bread. Fresh. Still soft. She was lying, kindly, but lying. "Thank you," I said. My voice came out rough. "Truly. Thank you." She nodded. "You need more work, you come back. I can always use help with inventory. Restocking, things like that." "Yes, ma'am, I will." I left before my voice could crack again. Outside, I counted my money as I walked. $3 from Grace, plus the 37 cents I'd had in my pocket since before. Since Trevor's house. $3.37. I needed $7 a week, which meant I needed $3.63 more. By the day after tomorrow. 36 hours. The math kept running through my head as I walked. Where else could I find work? Who else might hire me for a day, an afternoon, an hour? The sun was setting when I got back to the rail yard. Sky all pink and orange. Beautiful. Cold. I was thinking about how I'd share the food with Rusty, the bread. Definitely maybe some of the cheese when I rounded the corner and saw them. Someone standing by my boxcar. Just standing there. Waiting. I stopped. My heart did that thing again where it forgets how to beat properly, because I recognized them. Recognized the shape, the stance. A person I'd hoped I'd never have to see again. Mildred Thornton had made a career out of other people's misery. And my situation, a 65-year-old man living in a boxcar, was premium material for gossip. She was standing maybe 20 feet from my boxcar when I got back. Just standing there. Looking at it like it was something fascinating and disgusting at the same time. Like a car accident you can't help but stare at. I recognized her immediately. Hard not to. Mildred Thornton, wife of the feed store owner. 48, maybe 50. Always dressed like she was going somewhere important. Even when she was just going to the post office. And she talked. God, did she talk. She turned when she heard my footsteps. Her eyes went wide, not with surprise. With delight. The kind of delight people get when they've stumbled onto something they can turn into a story. "Un Edgar Brennan," she said, like she couldn't quite believe it. "Is that really you, my word? You're actually living here." I stopped a few feet away. The bag of groceries from Grace felt suddenly heavy in my hand. "You're Mrs. Thornton," I said. Kept my voice polite. Careful. "Can I help you with something?" "Help me?" She laughed. Not a nice laugh. "Oh no, dear. I'm just shocked is all. I mean, I'd heard rumors, but I didn't believe them. Living in a boxcar like some kind of vagrant. Vagrant. That's the word she used. I didn't say anything. Just tried to move past her toward the door. Does Trevor know? She asked. Following me. Actually following me. Does your son know you're living like this? That poor boy must be mortified. What did you do to make him throw you out? I stopped, turned around. Mrs. Thornton, I said. My voice came out flat, tired. I'm exhausted. Please excuse me. Her expression shifted. Offense. Like I'd insulted her somehow. Well, she said. I'm just trying to understand Edgar. People will talk, you know. They'll want to know what kind of person ends up living in a boxcar. I looked at her. Really looked at her. At her clean coat. Her styled hair. Her judgment. Let them talk, I said. I opened the boxcar door. Rusty was there immediately standing at the threshold, that low growl rumbling in his chest. He didn't like her. Smart dog. Mildred took a step back. And you're keeping a mangy dog, too. Figures. That's just the kind of person who... I didn't let her finish. Stepped inside with Rusty. Slid the door shut. Her voice was still going on the other side. Muffled now, but still going. Something about disgrace and setting a bad example and what would people think. I sat down, my back against the wall. Rusty pressed against my leg. My hands were shaking. Not from cold, from anger, from shame, from the effort of not shouting at her, not telling her to mind her own damn business, not explaining that her precious feed store owner husband had propositioned my wife at a church picnic 15 years ago, and I'd never told anyone because what was the point? I didn't owe her my story, didn't owe her anything, but I knew what was coming. Tomorrow, I said to Rusty. He looked up at me with those brown eyes. By tomorrow noon, everyone in town will know, and they'll all have opinions. He licked my hand, like he was saying it's okay, like he didn't care what anyone thought. Yeah, I said. Yeah, you're right. I shared the bread and cheese with him. We ate in silence. The apple I saved for morning. Outside, I could hear Mildred's footsteps finally walking away. Back to town. Back to her husband and her phone and her circle of friends who loved nothing more than picking apart someone else's life. I tried not to think about it. Tried to focus on what mattered, the $3.37 in my pocket. The fact that I still needed $3.63 more. That I had 30 hours left to find it. But my mind kept drifting to tomorrow. To walking into town for work. To the looks. The whispers. The way people would suddenly remember they had somewhere else to be when they saw me coming. I'd been through worse. Lost my wife. Lost my home. Lost my son. I could handle gossip. Couldn't I? I lay down that night with Rusty curled up next to me. The boxcar was warmer now with the insulation I'd added. Not comfortable, but survivable. I stared at the ceiling at the rusted metal panels catching moonlight through the gaps, and I thought about dignity, about what it means. Whether it's something you have or something you choose, I chose it. Right then. Whatever Mildred Thornton said about me, whatever the town thought, I'd keep choosing it. I was right about the timing, though. By noon the next day, I'd become the town's favorite topic of conversation. And not in any way that made my life easier. The knock came mid-morning. Different from Carl Henderson's knock. This one was gentler. Patient. I opened the door expecting trouble. Instead, I found an old man. White beard, face weathered like driftwood, holding a beat-up metal toolbox that looked older than I was. "Heard you were living here?" he said. No judgment in his voice, just fact. "Thought you might could use some help." I stared at him. I don't know you, sir." "Chester Lawson." He held out his hand. I shook it. His grip was still strong. Worked for the railroad 40 years before my body gave out. I know boxcars. I didn't know what to say to that. So I stepped back, let him in. He climbed inside with surprising agility for a man his age, set his toolbox down. Then he stood there, hands on his hips, looking around. Not bad for a first try, he said finally. But you're doing a few things wrong. I bristled a little at that. Couldn't help it. Wrong. See that? He pointed at the burlap sacks I'd stuffed into the wall gaps. You're packing them too tight. Air needs space to hold heat. You want them loose, then layer newspaper over top. I looked at the burlap, then back at him. He was right. Of course he was right. Basic thermodynamics. I'd been so focused on blocking the wind that I'd forgotten about trapped air being the real insulator. Oh, I said. Felt stupid. Yeah, you're right. Chester smiled. Not mean. Just understanding. You're an engineer, aren't you? I can tell. Engineers always try to overthink things. Mechanical engineer, I admitted. Retired. Thought so. He opened his toolbox. Come on, I'll show you. For the next few hours, Chester taught me things I should have known but didn't. Things about surviving in a boxcar that you only learn by actually doing it. How to properly insulate. Loose material, air pockets, then a vapor barrier that's your newspaper to stop condensation. How to build a fire pit that wouldn't burn through the floor. Wood'll scorch through eventually. Need a metal sheet underneath. And bricks if you can get 'em. Something that'll hold the heat, but not conduct it straight to the floor. How to create cross-ventilation without letting all the heat escape. Smoke needs a way out, but you don't want wind blowing straight through. See, you need baffles. Indirect airflow. Where to find coal. Freight cars drop chunks when they're loading. Check near the tracks. Good stuff burns hotter and longer than wood. We work together. 2 engineers, one young in spirit, one old in body, solving a problem the way engineers do. With logic. With practical solutions. With our hands. Chester told me stories while we worked. About living in boxcars for 5 years while building the Transcontinental Railroad. About winters so cold the metal would crack. About the tricks you learn when your life depends on it. You marry good materials with good technique, he said, and you can survive damn near anything. I don't know how to thank you, I said at one point. My throat tight again. Seemed to happen a lot lately. Chester waved a hand. Don't need thanks. I see it in your eyes, you're a fighter. You'll make it through. I'm not so sure about that. I am. He looked at me. Really looked at me. You know what the difference is between people who survive and people who don't? It ain't strength. It ain't luck. It's stubbornness. And mister, you got stubborn written all over you. I laughed. First real laugh I'd had in, God, I couldn't remember how long. When the work was done, when the boxcar was properly insulated, when the fire pit was safe and functional, when I understood how to keep myself alive through the rest of winter, Chester closed up his toolbox. Here, he said, pushing it toward me. Consider this a loan. Give it back when you're on your feet. Well, Chester, I can't. You can. You will. He climbed out of the boxcar, stood there in the doorway silhouetted against the afternoon sun. You come by my place if you need anything else. Address is in the toolbox, little note inside the lid. Why are you helping me? The question came out before I could stop it. Chester smiled. Sad. Because 30 years ago I was you, and someone helped me. That's how it works, son. We help each other. He walked away before I could say anything else. Just walked away. Back toward town. An old man with a limp and a good heart. I looked at the toolbox, opened the lid. Sure enough, there was a note. Address. and underneath it, in shaky handwriting, "You're stronger than you think." I sat down. Rusty came over, pressed his head against my knee. The boxcar was warmer now. Really warmer. Chester's work had made a real difference. The gaps were properly sealed. The fire pit was safe. I had a chance now. A real chance. But I still had $3.37 in my pocket. I still needed $3.63 more. And Carl Henderson would be here any minute to collect. Sometimes compassion comes from the most unexpected places. Carl Henderson taught me that the day he looked at the coins in my palm and made a decision that probably broke every railroad regulation in the book. I heard his footsteps before I saw him, recognized the rhythm, that same measured pace from before. I'd already packed. Spare clothes, the photo album, what little I couldn't leave behind. If this was the end, I'd walk out on my own terms. The knock came. I opened the door. "Mr. Henderson." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "I've prepared to leave if that's what's required." He didn't answer right away. Just looked past me into the boxcar. His eyes moved slow, deliberate, taking in the insulation work, the fire pit, the way everything was organized, now functional. "You've been working," he said finally. "Yes, sir." I pulled out what I had, held it toward him. "I know it's not enough, but if you could give me one more week." "Stop." He held up a hand, closed his eyes for a second. "Just stop." The silence stretched. I could hear my own heartbeat. Hear Rusty breathing somewhere behind me in the boxcar. Carl looked at me, then at the money, then back at the boxcar. "I have a daughter," he said. Quiet, like he was telling me a secret. "Hannah. She's 7. I didn't understand, didn't know what to say, so I waited, if something happened to me." His voice got rougher. "If my wife and I were gone, if Hannah ended up like you are now, alone with nowhere to go, I'd hope to God someone would show her mercy." My throat went tight. Couldn't breathe right. "Keep your money, Mr. Brennan." He said it firm, final. "You've got until Friday, next Friday. Can you manage that?" I nodded. Couldn't speak yet. "So you good?" He started to turn. Stopped. "This boxcar. It's built better than most houses I've seen. You should be proud of that." "I had help," I managed. "Chester Lawson." Something shifted in Carl's expression. Almost a smile. "Chester's the best of us. Listen to him." Then he walked to his truck, climbed in, drove away. I stood there watching until the dust settled and the road was empty again. Then my legs just gave out. I sat down hard on the floor, right there in the doorway. Rusty came over immediately, pushed his head into my chest. I wrapped my arms around him and I just held on, because this was mercy. Real mercy. The kind you don't earn. The kind someone gives you because they choose to see you as human instead of as a problem to solve. And I didn't know what to do with that. My whole life I'd earned things, worked for them, proved I deserved them. But this Carl had looked at me, at this pathetic old man living in a boxcar, and he'd chosen kindness over regulation, humanity over policy. Why us? Because of a 7-year-old girl he was terrified might one day need the same thing. I buried my face in Rusty's fur. Let myself feel it. The fear that had been crushing my chest for days. The relief that made my hands shake. The overwhelming weight of being seen, of being given a chance. "We got a week," I whispered to Rusty. "1 week to prove we deserve it." He licked my face, like he was saying, "You already do." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe Carl was right. That I'd built something here worth keeping. That I was more than what Trevor had said I was. More than what Mildred Thornton was telling the whole town. But believing it and proving it were two different things. I spent that evening organizing what I had. The tools Chester had loaned me, the supplies I'd scavenged, the small store of coal I'd found by the tracks. Everything had its place now. Everything had purpose. The boxcar was warmer than Trevor's house had ever been. Not just temperature, something else. Something I'd built with my own hands. But warmth doesn't pay rent, and I knew that when I walked into town tomorrow, people would be watching, waiting, some hoping I'd succeed, most expecting me to fail, because that's what small towns do. They watch, they judge, they place bets on your life, and wait to see if they called it right. I had 1 week to prove them wrong. 1 week to find enough work that people would look past the gossip, past the shame, past the man living in a boxcar and see what an engineer, a father, someone worth hiring. I didn't know, but I knew this failing wasn't just about losing the boxcar. It was about proving Trevor right, proving Mildred right, proving to myself that everything I'd thought I was, everything I'd built in 40 years of work, had been wrong all along. I couldn't let that happen. I looked at Rusty curled up by the fire pit now, content, trusting. Tomorrow we start over, I told him. Tomorrow we show them. He opened one eye, looked at me, closed it again. Yeah, he had the right idea. 1 day at a time, 1 job at a time, $1 at a time, 7 days to build a life. I could do that. I had to. Being invisible is lonely, but being visible and ignored, that's a special kind of torture. I learned that over 4 days of walking through town, 4 days of knocking on doors, 4 days of watching people look at me, really look at me, and then decide I wasn't worth their time. Day 4, the hardware store first. Made sense, right? I knew tools, new repairs, new building. The owner was restocking shelves when I walked in. He looked up, saw me. His expression changed. Not hostile, just closed. Morning, Edgar. Morning, Tom. I kept my voice steady, professional. Saw you had a help wanted sign. I'm available if you need someone. Sorry, Edgar. He said it fast, too fast. Position's been filled. I looked at the window. The sign was still there. Big letters. Help wanted. Oh, I said. Must have just happened. Yeah, just this morning. We both knew he was lying. I could see it in his face. He could see that I knew. Well, I tried to smile. Thanks anyway. I walked out. The sign stayed in the window. Day 5. The diner at lunchtime. Busy. Loud. The manager was hauling plates when I caught her attention. We need younger staff, she said. Didn't even let me finish asking. Sorry, nothing personal. I was 65, not 90. I could lift, could work, could move. I understand, I said anyway. Later that afternoon, the gas station. I was halfway across the lot when the owner saw me coming. He looked right at me, shook his head once, then turned and walked back inside his shop. Didn't even let me ask. I stood there in the cold, watched my breath cloud in the air, felt something inside me start to crack. Day 6. I was walking through the town square when I heard them. Young voices, laughing. Hey, Boxcar Bob. I didn't turn around. Kept walking. Yo, Bob, find any good trash today? Bobby Thornton, 22 years old. Never held a job longer than 3 months. His father owned the feed store, William Thornton, Mildred's husband. The kid had his mother's mouth and his father's mean streak. More laughter, his friends joining in. I kept walking. My dad says you must have done something really bad, Bobby called after me. For your own kid to throw you out like that. My hands clenched. Kept walking. Their laughter followed me 3 blocks. Later I was near the church when Reverend Clark stepped out. Like he'd been waiting. Edgar. He had that voice. The one that sounds concerned but isn't. I've heard about your situation. Reverend, Perhaps this is a time for reflection. He touched my shoulder. I wanted to pull away. A time to consider the choices that brought you here. I just need work, Reverend. Just sometimes hardship is God's way of teaching humility. His voice got softer, more pitying, worse. Have you considered examining what led you to this place? I looked at him, really looked at him, in his warm coat, his clean collar, his certain righteousness. When I examine that every night, I said, quiet. In the cold, Reverend, I examine it plenty. I walked away before he could say anything else. Day 7, I'd been avoiding it, taking longer routes, going blocks out of my way. But I was tired, so tired. And it was the shortest path back, so I walked past Trevor's house. I didn't mean to stop, didn't mean to look. But there were lights in the windows, smoke from the chimney, warmth, home, everything I used to have. I saw movement inside, a shadow crossing past the window. Trevor, he turned, saw me standing there in the street. Our eyes met through the glass. For 1 second, just one, I thought he might come out, might say something, might, I don't know, acknowledge I existed. Instead, his face went hard, cold. He reached up and pulled the curtain shut, just like that, closed me out, closed me away. I stood there, couldn't move, couldn't breathe, like I'd been hit in the chest with something heavy and sharp. Another window, movement. Brittany's face appeared. She looked at me, right at me. She smiled, then she turned away laughing. I could see her mouth moving, talking to Trevor, probably about me, about the pathetic old man standing in the street staring at his son's house like some kind of ghost. My legs finally moved, got me walking, got me away from there. I don't remember the walk back to the boxcar, don't remember opening the door, don't remember climbing inside, but I remember sitting down on the floor. I remember Rusty coming over, whining, licking my face like he was trying to fix something that couldn't be fixed. And I remember putting my arms around him and crying, really crying. For the first time since Trevor locked that door, since I lost everything, since I became this thing people crossed the street to avoid, I cried until I couldn't breathe, until my throat hurt, until there was nothing left. Rusty just held still, let me hold him, didn't judge, didn't leave. Good dog. When I finally stopped, when I could breathe again, I sat there with my back against the cold metal wall. I'd hit bottom. That's what this was. Rock bottom, the place you fall to when you've lost everything, when your own son closes the curtain on your face, when strangers won't hire you and children mock you, and holy men tell you it's your fault for not being humble enough. Rock bottom. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It's solid. You can't fall any further. And once you're there, once you know this is as bad as it gets, there's a strange kind of clarity. I looked at Rusty, at the boxcar around me, at the tools Chester had loaned me, at the fire pit that kept me alive. I'd built this, with nothing, with less than nothing. Maybe I could build more. The next morning, something unexpected happened. Grace Coleman knocked on my boxcar door at 6 in the morning with an offer that changed everything. And standing behind her was someone I never expected, Theodore Walsh, attorney at law. The knock was different. Not Carl's official bang, bang, bang. Not the hesitant tap of someone uncomfortable. 2 firm knocks, purposeful, patient. I wiped my face, tried to make myself presentable, opened the door. Grace stood there in her practical coat, and behind her, an older man. Late 60s, maybe 70. White hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it too many times. Old suit clean but worn, kind eyes. The kind that have seen things but haven't gone hard. Edgar, Grace said. This is Theodore Walsh. He's an attorney and a friend. I stared. Attorney, I haven't done anything. You're not in trouble, Mr. Brennan. Theodore's voice was warm, reassuring. May we come in? I stepped back. Let them inside. The boxcar suddenly felt very small with 3 people in it. Rusty came over, sniffed Theodore's hand, wagged his tail. Good sign. Hup, please, I said. Gestured to the only chair I had, an overturned crate. Sit. Grace took the crate. Theodore and I sat on the floor, backs against opposite walls. Rusty settled between us. Mrs. Coleman told me about your situation, Theodore said. But I'd like to hear it from you, if you're willing. So I told him. Not the whole story. Not the parts that hurt too much. Just the facts. My son asked me to leave. I found this place. Mr. Henderson, the railroad inspector, gave me a deadline. I need to pay rent or move on. Yet when did your son ask you to leave? December 2nd. Felt like a lifetime ago. At night, about 8:30. How much notice did he give you? 10 minutes. Theodore wrote something in a small notebook. And you'd been living with him how long? 6 months, since I sold my house. More writing. Then Theodore looked up. Met my eyes. Your son had no legal right to evict you without proper notice, Mr. Brennan. Montana law requires at least 30 days for a tenant. Even a family member living rent-free qualifies. But he held up a hand before I could speak. That's a conversation for another day. Right now, you need income. Grace leaned forward. I've been talking to some people. We have work for you. The heating system in my office building is acting up, Theodore said. I'll pay $15 if you can fix it. I blinked. $15, that's very generous, sir. It's fair market rate. The last repairman wanted 20 and couldn't solve the problem. Mrs. Coleman tells me you're an engineer. Oh, I was. Mechanical engineer, retired. Then you're exactly what I need, Grace spoke up. And I need help with weekly inventory. $10 a week. Steady work. My throat went tight. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Grace said. Simple as that. Yes, I managed. Yes, thank you. Theodore pulled out a small notebook from his jacket. Set it on the floor between us. Keep records, Edgar. Everything. Every dollar you earn. Every improvement you make to this boxcar. Dates, materials, costs, all of it. Trust me on this. Why? Because I believe you may have legal grounds regarding your son's actions, and possibly regarding this boxcar. But first, we need to ensure you survive long enough to pursue either. He paused, looked around the boxcar, at the insulation work, the fire pit, the organized space. I did some checking, he said. This boxcar, according to Northern Montana rail records, it was officially decommissioned in 2018. It's been sitting here forgotten for years. Technically, it's abandoned property. My heart started beating faster. What does that mean? It means with proper documentation and a reasonable claim, you could establish ownership. Montana has adverse possession laws. If you openly occupy, improve, and maintain abandoned property for a certain period, you can claim it. But another raised hand. Survive this winter first. Then we'll talk about legalities. He stood, brushed off his pants, extended his hand. I stood, shook it. His grip was firm, honest. 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, he said. Come to my office. The heating system awaits. Grace stood too. And stop by the store Thursday. We'll start inventory then. They left together. I watched them walk away across the rail yard. 2 people who barely knew me. 2 people who'd decided I was worth helping. Why? I didn't know. But I wasn't going to question it. That afternoon, I fixed Theodore's heating system. Took me 4 hours. The problem was simple, a blocked flue and a faulty pressure valve. Basic stuff. but it had been driving him crazy for weeks. When I finished, when the heat was flowing properly through the old building, Theodore pulled me aside. "Edgar," he said, quiet, serious. "You're not worthless. You never were. Sometimes it takes losing everything to prove what you're really made of." He smiled then, that kind, weathered smile. "Now make sure you keep this place. Legally." I walked back to the boxcar that evening with $15 in my pocket, with the promise of 10 more every week, with a notebook to keep records, with the actual possibility of owning something, of having a home, a real home, with hope. For the first time since Trevor locked that door, I had real hope. Rusty was waiting when I got back. I sat down next to him, pulled out the notebook Theodore had given me, opened it to the first page, and I wrote, December 8th. Income $15, heating repair. Theodore Walsh. Expenses $0. Net $15. Improvements to boxcar insulation, newspaper, burlap. Fire pit, metal sheet stones. Cross ventilation system. Notes. Theodore Walsh, attorney, believes adverse possession claim possible. Keep detailed records. Survive winter first. I looked at those words. At that $15. At the possibility written in ink. Maybe I could do this. Maybe I could actually do this. Over the next 6 weeks, I turned that boxcar from a survival shelter into something else entirely, a home. Weeks 1 and 2, mid-January hit hard. Temperature dropped to 30 below some nights. But I had work now. Real work. Theodore's heating system turned out to be more complicated than I'd thought. Took me 2 full days. Ancient boiler, corroded pipes, pressure regulator that hadn't been serviced in probably 20 years. But I fixed it. And when Theodore handed me that $15, I had to turn away so he wouldn't see my face. Grace's inventory work started that same week. Mondays and Thursdays. $10 a week. Steady. Reliable. I'd show up at 6 in the morning, help her count stock, organize deliveries, move the heavy stuff she couldn't manage alone. And I built. First thing, a sleeping platform. Used pallets from behind the lumberyard. Scrap wood nobody wanted. Raised it 2 feet off the floor so the cold couldn't seep up from below. Chester came by, looked at it, nodded once. That nod meant more than any compliment. "Now do the walls right," he said. So I did. Stripped out my rushed burlap work. Started over. Loose material for air pockets. Newspaper layers. Proper vapor barrier. It took 3 days, but when I finished, the temperature inside, the boxcar jumped 15 degrees. The fire pit got a metal base. Chester supervised that. "You burn through that floor, you're done," he said. "No second chances with fire." End of week 2, Carl came for rent. I had it ready, $7, exact change. He counted it, looked at me, looked at the boxcar, the improvements already visible, nodded, then left. Weeks 3 and 4, early February. Still brutal cold, but I was learning. I built a water collection system, controlled snow melt using the heat from the fire pit, channeled it into clean tin containers. Not fancy, but it worked. The door was next. Every gap sealed. Weather stripping made from torn fabric and tar paper. Cut the wind penetration by 80%. Maybe more. Then I added a porch. Just a small one, 6 feet by 4. Scrap lumber and a salvaged piece of corrugated metal for the roof. Kept the weather off the door. Gave me a place to store firewood where it stayed dry. Theodore's heating job paid out that week. Another $15. I almost cried when he handed it to me. "You do good work, Edgar," he said. "Don't forget that." I wrote everything in the notebook. Dates, expenses, improvements, materials. Theodore had been right about keeping records. It was starting to matter. Total income so far, $47. Paid to Carl, $28. 4 weeks at 7 each. I was surviving. More than surviving. I was building something. Weeks 5 and 6. Late February brought a false spring. 3 days where the temperature hit 40. The snow started melting. I knew it wouldn't last, but I used those days. Paint first. Found 6 cans at the dump. Faded blue but clean. I painted the outside of the boxcar. Made it look less abandoned, less forgotten. Then windows, 2 small ones. Glass from a demolished building. Chester helped me install them properly. Sealed them tight. Let light in without letting heat out. Inside, I organized everything. Storage area, sleeping area, a little workshop corner for tools. Chester brought me some old books. I built a small shelf for them, found a cracked mirror at the dump, hung it on the wall. Reflected the lamplight made the space feel bigger. And through it all, I kept the notebook. Every improvement, every dollar, every material source. Grace kept bringing expired food, fresh bread, perfect apples, vegetables that had maybe one more day on them, she'd say. We both knew she was lying. I accepted it with as much dignity as I could manage, and thanked her every time. Chester came by at least once a week, always teaching. See this plant. He'd point to some scraggly thing poking through the snow. Edible. Tastes like hell, but it'll keep you alive. He showed me how to set rabbit snares. I caught 3 over those 6 weeks. Skinned them, cooked them. Nothing wasted. You coal, he said one day. Took me along the tracks. Freight cars drop it when they're loading. Look here and here. Good chunks. Burns hot. I collected 2 burlap sacks full that day. And Rusty. God, Rusty transformed. His coat got shinier. Ribs stopped showing. He started playing again, chasing birds, digging in snow, acting like the dog he should have been all along. Some nights I'd sit with him by the fire pit, both of us warm, both of us fed, and I'd think about how far we'd come. Then the warning started. Late February. The radio mentioned a major weather system forming over the Arctic. Chester came by one evening. Stood outside the boxcar looking up. You see those birds? He asked. Pointed at a flock of crows flying south. What about them? When crows fly south in February, something bad's coming. Stock up, Edgar. I've seen this before. I took him seriously. Started gathering extra coal, extra wood, extra food. And I noticed something else. A man walked past the boxcar one day. Stopped. Stared. Said to his companion, that actually looks livable. First sign the town was noticing. Noticing what I'd built. What I'd done with nothing. By week 6, I'd earned $174 total. 15 from Theodore. 6 weeks at 10 from Grace. Some odd jobs here and there, fixing Mrs. Henderson's back door for $5, repairing a fence for another $3. I'd paid Carl $42. 6 weeks at 7. And I'd saved $132. Every penny I didn't absolutely need went into a tin box under my sleeping platform. The boxcar wasn't just shelter anymore. It had windows, a porch, paint, organization, warmth. It felt like a home. By the first week of March, I'd transformed a forgotten rail car into something that could survive a Montana winter. The railroad company still hadn't noticed. The town was starting to. And somewhere over the Arctic, a storm was forming. The sky turned the color of old bruises on March 8th. Chester took one look and said, 3 days, maybe 4. Then all hell breaks loose. I woke that morning to light that felt wrong. Not dark, not bright. Just off. Like the air itself was holding its breath, I stepped outside. The pressure hit me immediately. That weird weight in the atmosphere that comes before something big. The sky was purple-gray, heavy, threatening. Chester showed up within the hour. Didn't knock. Just appeared at my door like he'd been summoned. "It was how long?" I asked. 3 days, he said, looking at that sky. Maybe 4. Then it hits. How do you know? He looked at me. 75 years of Montana winter in those eyes. I just do. By noon, the radio confirmed it. The National Weather Service has issued a blizzard warning for northern Montana and southern Canada. A historic winter storm system is expected. Anticipated snowfall 4 to 6 feet. Duration 7 to 10 days. Wind chill temperatures -40 to -50 degrees Fahrenheit. This will be a life-threatening event. Seek shelter immediately. I sat there listening. Rusty pressed against my leg. 7 to 10 days. I looked around the boxcar. At everything I'd built. Everything I'd prepared. Was it enough? Guess we're about to find out, I said to Rusty. March 8th through 10th. Preparation. I made a list. Engineer's habit. Check every item before the deadline. Coal 80 pounds. Enough for 14 days if I was careful. Check. Food, canned goods, dried beans, rice. 10 days for 2 living things. Check. Water. Every container filled. Snow could be melted if needed. Check. Medical supplies, basic first aid kit. Grace had given me bandages, aspirin. Not much, but something. Check. Insulation. Every gap sealed. Every crack stuffed with newspaper and tar paper. Check. Fire pit checked it 3 times. Metal sheet secure. Won't burn through the floor. Check. Ventilation smoke escapes properly. Won't suffocate us. Check. I brought every piece of dry firewood inside. Stacked it against the wall. No exceptions. Everything that could freeze or blow away came inside the boxcar. Everything. Chester came by on the 9th. Brought 2 wool blankets. You'll need these, he said. Chester, is this going to be as bad as, worse than 72? That storm killed 47 people. I swallowed. Should I go to the depot? Carl mentioned a shelter there. Chester looked around my boxcar. At the insulation, the fire pit, the organized supplies. So this place is more solid than that depot, he said. You got good insulation, proper ventilation, controlled fire. Stay here. You'll be safer. We reinforced the door seal together. Extra layers. Extra protection. If it gets bad, Chester said before he left, people will come here. Be ready for that. I nodded. Didn't fully understand what he meant. Not yet. Carl showed up late afternoon on the 10th, the day before. Mr. Brennan, the railroad's opening emergency shelter at the depot. My family will be there. You should consider. I appreciate the offer, Carl, but I think I'm better off here. He looked around, saw the preparation, the supplies, the organization. You did your homework, he said. I had good teachers. If it gets bad, really bad, the offer still stands. For you and anyone else who needs it. Thank you, but I think I'll be okay. He left looking worried. That evening, I sealed the last gaps. Checked the fire pit one final time. Made sure the coal was dry and accessible. Filled the last water containers. Rusty wouldn't settle. Kept pacing to the door. Whining. I know, buddy, I said. Something's coming. The temperature was dropping fast. 15 below when the sun set. At 11:45 that night, the first snowflakes started falling. Within 30 minutes, I couldn't see 5 feet past the door. The wind picked up, started howling, screaming, shaking the walls of the boxcar. I added coal to the fire, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. Rusty pressed against my legs. Midnight, that's when it hit. Full force. The wind sounded like a freight train, made entirely of ice and fury. Snow wasn't falling anymore, it was being thrown sideways, horizontal, hitting the boxcar like fists. The temperature dropped. 25 below. Still falling. I lay down on my sleeping platform. Rusty curled up next to me, his body warm, trembling. I prepared for everything I could think of, I told him. The wind answered, louder, angrier. I closed my eyes. Tried to sleep. 6 a.m., March 11th. Day 1 of the storm. I woke to pounding. Not wind, not snow hitting metal. Pounding. On the door. Desperate, frantic. Multiple voices, muffled by the wind. Someone shouting, "Please somebody help us." I sat up, heart hammering. Rusty was already at the door, barking. The pounding came again, harder. "Is anyone in there, please?" I grabbed my coat, stumbled to the door. My hands shook as I worked the latches. The storm had come at midnight, like a freight train made of ice and rage. I'd prepared for everything I could think of, but I hadn't prepared for that pounding 6 hours later, desperate, frantic, begging for help. When I opened that door, everything changed. Before I reveal who anyone is, please comment. Number 1, open the door. Number 2, close the door. I need to know you're still listening. And a small note. This story may contain some fabricated elements. If you're uncomfortable, stop right here. But if you want to know the truth about that fateful night, then stay with me. Snow, blinding, horizontal, and through it, Mildred Thornton, covered in ice, hair frozen, sobbing. "Please, Edgar, please, our house, the roof collapsed. William's hurt." Behind her, William, holding his arm at a wrong angle, face white with pain. I had maybe 3 seconds to decide. This woman had called me worthless, had told the whole town I was a vagrant, had made my life hell. She was also freezing to death. So was her husband. "And get inside," I said. "Now." I pulled them in. Snow blew in with them. I slammed the door shut. Mildred collapsed, sobbing. Thank you, oh God, thank you." I ignored her. Went to William. His arm was definitely broken. I splinted it with a board and torn fabric, gave him aspirin, settled them near the fire. Not too close, but close enough. Mildred kept crying, kept thanking me. I didn't answer. 8 a.m., more pounding. Bobby Thornton, the kid who'd called me Boxcar Bob, who'd mocked me in the town square, soaked through, shaking so hard his teeth were chattering, alone. "Mr. Brennan, I'm sorry." Voice cracking, terrified. "I'm so sorry for what I said. Please, I know I don't deserve. My parents' house is flooded. They made it to the depot, but I couldn't get there in time. Get in here before you freeze to death." I pulled him inside. He stared at me. Shock. Disbelief. "You. Why would you help me after?" "Because that's what people do," I said. "Sit by the fire." 10 a.m. Another knock. Reverend Clark. Haggard. Frozen. "Edgar the First. I was wrong about you. Wrong about everything. The church roof is compromised. I have nowhere, can I?" "Reverend, get inside before we both freeze." He came in, saw me tending to the others, caring for people who'd hurt me. "You're a better Christian than I ever was," he said quietly. Known, urgent pounding, desperate. I opened the door. Carl Henderson, carrying Hannah, his daughter, 7 years old, wrapped in a blanket, lips blue, eyes half closed, not fully conscious. His wife Sarah supporting them. All 3 in bad shape. "Edgar, please." Carl's voice broke. "We tried to make it to the depot. Car got stuck. Hannah, she's too cold. Please." "Give her to me." I took Hannah, wrapped her in my own blanket, put her closest to the fire, held her there, rubbed her arms, her hands, trying to warm her back to life. Sarah was crying. "Thank you. Oh God, thank you." Hannah's color started coming back. Slowly, pink replacing that terrible blue. Carl watched me save his daughter. I saw it in his face. The realization. He'd almost evicted me, almost sent me back into that cold. And now I was saving his child's life. The afternoon brought more. Grace Coleman. Her store had flooded. Chester Lawson. Even his cabin was too cold. 3 neighbors. Different emergencies. Same desperation. Each time I let them in, no hesitation. The space got crowded. Really crowded. I organized it like I'd organize a project. Sleeping areas. Food rationing. Fire management shifts. 14 people by 6 p.m. Then at 7, one more knock. Different from the others. Hesitant. Almost ashamed. I opened the door. Trevor. My son. Behind him, Brittany, shaking, miserable. Everyone in the boxcar went quiet. Trevor couldn't look at me. Dad, Our house, part of the wall, collapsed. It's not safe, and I know I don't deserve. I know I have no right, but please, silence. I didn't speak, didn't move. 10 seconds passed. Everyone watching. 20 seconds. Mildred started to say something. I held up my hand. She stopped. 30 seconds. I looked at Trevor. Really looked at him. Saw my son. Broken. Desperate. Ashamed. I stepped aside. Come in, I said. Both of you. Trevor stared. Dad, I said, come in. It's -20 outside. They came in. Brittany looked around the cramped, humble space with something like disdain. Still ungrateful. Still entitled. Trevor didn't look at anyone. Found the farthest corner. Sat down. Stared at the floor. 16 people now, including me. Plus Rusty. I looked around at their faces. The woman who'd ruined my reputation. The kid who'd mocked me. The reverend who'd judged me. The inspector who'd threatened me. My son who'd thrown me out. Every single one of them had hurt me. And I'd let them all in. Not because I'd forgiven them. I hadn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But because they were human. And they were dying. And I'd built something that could keep them alive. That night the storm reached its peak. Wind screaming, walls shaking. The temperature outside dropped to 40 below. Inside, 16 people huddled together. Some sleeping, some crying, some just staring at the fire. Irony has a cruel sense of humor. I sat with my back against the wall. Rusty beside me. Hannah wrapped in my blanket, finally warm, finally breathing normally. 10 days and nights in a space meant for cargo, trapped with people who had treated me like garbage, while a storm outside tried its hardest to kill us all. Conditions like that teach you things. About people. About yourself. Days 1, 2, 3. No one slept the first night. 16 of us were crammed into a steel boxcar 9 meters long. Some lay on the floor. Others sat with their backs against the walls, and a few stood near the fire pit, because it was the only place warm enough to feel your fingers. Outside, the wind screamed like it wanted to rip the metal apart. The temperature was -35 Celsius and still falling. Early morning of day 1, I stood up. Everyone looked at me. I didn't know why. I was just the old man whose own son had thrown him out. But they waited. We have coal for 12 days, if we're careful. I said, my voice rough. Food for 8 if we ration. We work together or we don't make it. Mildred Thornton crossed her arms. She had called me a failure before. So what's your plan? I didn't have one. Then 40 years as a mechanical engineer kicked in. I started thinking in systems. We do shifts, I said. 3 people on fire duty. 4-hour rotations. Fire watchers stay awake and keep the heat steady. The rest rotate between sleep and watch. Chester Lawson nodded. You've done this before. No, I said. But I've built harder systems. That was enough. Mildred organized the sleeping layout, alternating head to feet to save space. Reverend Clark led morning and evening prayers, his voice steady in the cold. Bobby Thornton hauled snow to melt for water without complaint. Grace Coleman tended the injured, especially William Thornton's broken arm. Trevor stayed silent in the corner, but worked when asked. Brittany complained constantly, and soon people stopped listening. Days 4 and 5. On the evening of day 4, Hannah started coughing. By midnight, it was constant. By morning, she was burning with fever. She's on fire, Sarah whispered, holding her daughter. Grace checked her forehead and looked at me with dread. She needs antibiotics. Without them, this could become pneumonia. Carl knelt beside his daughter, pleading to no one in particular. What do you have? I asked. Herbs, Grace said. Not enough. Then we make it enough. For 24 hours, I didn't leave Hannah's side. Grace brewed what she could. I kept her warm, cooled her forehead when the fever spiked, gave her water one sip at a time, and told stories to keep her grounded. That night, she became delirious. "Are you an angel?" she asked. "No," I said, fighting my voice. "Just a stubborn old man." No one slept. We listened to every breath. At dawn on day 5, the fever broke. "Mr. Edgar," she whispered. "I'm here," I said, smiling through tears. Carl hugged me, sobbing. Sarah kissed my hand and turned away. "She's going to be okay," I said. And she was. Day 6, 7, 8. Something shifted after that. People didn't look at me with pity or need anymore. It was respect. Mildred sat beside me on day 6. "What I said about you was cruel," she admitted. "You're the best man I know. We all regret things I said. What matters is what we do next." That night, Bobby told me he'd tell everyone what I'd done. "I didn't do it for recognition," I said. "I know," he replied. On day 8, Reverend Clark stopped mid-prayer. "Edgar Brennan never preached," he said. "He lived it." I wanted to disappear. There was nowhere to hide. Trevor watched everything silent and tense. Brittany still complained. Days 9 and 10. On the afternoon of day 9, the wind stopped. Chester cracked the door. "It's over." Morning of day 10, I opened it fully. Snow towered around us, white and untouched. The sky was blue. The silence was unreal. One by one, we stepped outside. Weak. Alive. Carl put his hand on my shoulder. "You saved 16 lives. We saved each other," I said. Everyone hugged, crying and laughing together. They pulled me in. I looked back at the boxcar and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Trevor tried to reach me. "Dad." I walked away. "Not yet." 3 days later, a man in a suit arrived with a camera. His name was Owen Matthews, and he wanted to tell my story to the world. Fame is a double-edged sword. One article called me a hero. Another, written by the same man for $5,000, called me mentally incompetent. And the person who paid for that second article was my son. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how it happened. 3 days after the storm ended, Owen Matthews showed up at my boxcar. He had a camera, a notebook. That professional manner journalists get: polite but persistent, friendly but calculating. He wanted to tell my story, he said, for the paper, for people to know what I'd done. I didn't want attention, never did. But I also didn't say no. He interviewed me for 2 days, March 23rd and 24th. Took photos of everything: the fire pit, the sleeping area, the insulation Chester had helped me install. He talked to everyone I'd saved. I heard Carl tell him he saved my daughter's life. Hannah would have died without him. Mildred. He saved all of us. Every single one. Chester built this shelter with his own hands. Engineering at its finest. The article came out March 26th. Montana hero retired engineer saves 16 lives in historic blizzard. And then everything changed. The story spread. Fast. National news. My photo everywhere: this uncomfortable old man standing in front of a rusty boxcar. Reporters calling. People driving out to see the place like it was some kind of museum. I didn't know what to do with any of it. Then, March 28th, I got a call from Northern Montana Railroad. The executives wanted to meet. I was terrified. Thought maybe they were angry I'd been living on their property without permission. But when I showed up at their office, they smiled. "Mr. Brennan," the director said, "your story has brought considerable positive attention to our railroad. In recognition of your extraordinary circumstances and your resourcefulness, we're transferring ownership of the boxcar and the land it sits on to you. Free and clear." He handed me papers. Official deed. Signatures. Stamps. I stared at them. This is really mine. Consider it good publicity for us," he said. "You're a hero, Mr. Brennan, and heroes deserve homes." I walked out of that office holding papers that proved I owned something. For the first time since Trevor kicked me out, I owned something again. March 29th, people threw a small celebration at the boxcar, everyone shaking my hand. More apologies. Grace brought food. Chester brought beer. Carl brought Hannah. She'd drawn me a picture stick figures of me and Rusty in front of the boxcar. It meant more to me than any newspaper article. That's when I saw Trevor, standing about 100 meters away. Brittany beside him, whispering something in his ear. Our eyes met across the distance. He looked away first. I should have known then. Should have seen what was coming. But I didn't. I was too happy. Too relieved. Too stupid. 2 weeks went by. Quiet weeks. Good weeks, I thought. Then April 16th happened. Grace brought me the newspaper that morning. Her face told me something was wrong before I even looked at the headline. Questions raised about Hero, Edgar Brennan's mental competency. I couldn't breathe for a moment. Sources close to Brennan report concerning behaviors. A neighbor's note he frequently talks to himself. Mental health experts point out that living in a boxcar while creative is not typical behavior of a sound mind. Family members express concern about his ability to manage property and finances, and then the quote. From an anonymous family source, "My father needs help. He can't take care of himself. We're worried about him." I read it 3 times. Couldn't understand. Couldn't process. Why would someone... Grace sat beside me. Edgar, someone paid for this. Who would... My phone rang. Theodore Walsh. Edgar, listen to me carefully. Someone's trying to destroy you. This is a coordinated attack. But who? I don't know yet, Theodore said. But I'm going to find out. Over the next few days, I watched it happen. The way people looked at me started changing. Again. Whispers when I walked by. Maybe he does have problems. Living in a boxcar isn't exactly normal. It felt like being kicked out all over again. Like watching everything I'd built crumble. April 22nd. I was outside painting the boxcar, touching up spots where the paint had chipped. Trying to keep busy, trying not to think about that article. I heard a car pull up, a police cruiser. My heart dropped. But then I saw it wasn't for an arrest. Trevor got out. Behind him, Brittany, and a man in an expensive suit I'd never seen before. Trevor, I put down the paintbrush. What's going on? The man in the suit stepped forward. Mr. Edgar Brennan, I'm Clifford Ramsey, attorney at law. I represent your son, Trevor Brennan. He pulled out folders, legal documents. We have medical documentation proving you are mentally incompetent to manage property or make sound decisions. He showed me papers, a psychiatric evaluation, professional looking, dated 3 months back, signed by a doctor I'd never heard of. This evaluation shows signs of cognitive decline, inability to care for yourself, and concerning behavioral patterns. My hands started shaking. That's a lie. I never saw that doctor. Additionally, Clifford continued like I hadn't spoken. We have documentation proving that 3 months ago you verbally gifted this property to your son. We're here to take possession. The world tilted. What? That's... Trevor, Trevor wouldn't look at me. Just stared at the ground. Dad, this is for your own good. You need proper care. You can't live in a boxcar forever. Brittany behind him, wearing this satisfied little smile. You're doing this for the land, I said, my voice breaking. For money. Trevor still wouldn't look up. You don't understand. You're not well. You have 30 days to vacate this property, Mr. Brennan, Clifford said. Otherwise, we'll proceed with court-ordered eviction. They left. I stood there, alone, shaking so hard I had to sit down on the ground. My own son, trying to take away the only thing I had left. Theodore worked fast after that. Over the next 2 weeks, he dug into everything. And what he found. He came to my boxcar on May 1st with a folder full of papers. Edgar, I need to show you something. Bank records. Owen Matthews, the journalist who wrote both articles, had received 2 deposits from Trevor: $5,000 on April 9th, another $5,000 on April 16th, the same day that second article ran. Email trail between Trevor, this lawyer Clifford, and Owen. Planning everything. The doctor, who supposedly evaluated me, not even licensed in Montana, turned out to be Clifford's brother-in-law. The signatures on those gift documents forged. Timeline showing Trevor had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. Your son didn't just abandon you, Theodore said quietly. He tried to have you declared incompetent, paid a journalist to destroy your reputation, and is attempting to steal your property with forged documents. He paused. And this is fraud, Edgar. Premeditated fraud. I sat there. Couldn't speak. Couldn't cry. Just numb. He's still my son, I finally said. Then we'll give him a chance to do the right thing in court, Theodore said. But Edgar, you need to be ready to fight. The community rallied around me after that. Carl, I'll testify. He saved my daughter. That man is sharp as they come. I'll tell them about his work ethic, his intelligence. Chester. I'll explain the engineering. They'll understand. Mildred came to me personally. I spread lies about you once, Edgar. Never again. This time I'll tell the truth. Even Bobby Thornton. I'll tell them what you taught me. How you gave me a second chance when nobody else would. Reverend Clark. I'll speak to your character, your faith, people I'd saved. People who'd once treated me like trash, now standing beside me. Theodore prepped me for 3 weeks. What they'd ask. How to answer. How to stay calm when Clifford tried to provoke me. Oh, they'll try to make you angry, he warned. They'll twist your words. Don't let them. What if I can't? You can, Theodore said. You survived a blizzard with 16 people, Edgar. You can survive a courtroom. The trial was set for May 20th, 10 in the morning, County Courthouse. I had 3 weeks to prepare to face my own son in court. 3 weeks to gather evidence that I was sane, competent, and deserving of keeping the home I'd built with my own hands. 3 weeks to prove once and for all that I was not useless. I spent those weeks going over my notebook, the one Theodore had told me to keep back in December. Every improvement I'd made to the boxcar. Every dollar earned and spent. Every decision documented. 40 years of engineering experience reduced to proving I could think straight. On the night of May 19th, I couldn't sleep. Rusty lay beside me, sensing something was wrong. I stared at the ceiling of my boxcar, my home, and wondered if this would be my last night here. Tomorrow I'd face Trevor in court. Tomorrow I'd find out if everything I'd built, everything I'd survived, was enough. Tomorrow I'd prove once and for all that I was not useless. The courtroom was packed. Every person I'd saved during that storm was there. Every person who'd once abandoned me was there. And in the front row, my son Trevor sat next to his lawyer, unable to look at me. I walked in at exactly 10 o'clock on May 20th. Theodore beside me. Rusty had to stay outside, no dogs allowed in court. The judge was a woman in her 60s. Stern face. Hard eyes. The kind of person who'd seen every trick in the book. The courtroom felt too small. Every seat filled. People standing in the back. I saw them all, Carl holding Sarah's hand. Hannah between them wearing her Sunday dress. Grace in the 3rd row. Chester near the aisle. Mildred and William. Bobby Thornton. Reverend Clark. All 16 people from that storm. And in the front row, Trevor. Brittany beside him. Clifford Ramsey on his other side, expensive suit leather briefcase, confident smile. The judge banged her gavel. This is a competency hearing regarding Edgar Brennan. Mr. Ramsey, you may begin. Clifford stood up, buttoned his jacket. Your Honor, Edgar Brennan is a 65-year-old man living in a boxcar. While his actions during the blizzard were commendable, that doesn't change the fact that he shows clear signs of mental decline. We have psychiatric evaluations, witness testimony, and documented concerning behaviors. His son Trevor Brennan seeks guardianship to ensure his father receives proper care. Theodore stood. Your Honor, Edgar Brennan is a retired mechanical engineer who overcame impossible adversity, saved 16 lives, and turned abandoned property into a home. This isn't about competency. This is about greed. Trevor Brennan wants his father's land, and he's willing to destroy his father's reputation to get it. The judge looked at both of them. Present your evidence, Mr. Ramsey. Clifford called his first witness. Dr. Morrison, please take the stand. A middle-aged man walked up. Nervous. Kept looking at his notes. He testified that I had signs of delusion inability to adapt to social norms concerning isolationist behavior. I sat there listening to this stranger describe me like I was broken. Theodore stood for cross-examination. Dr. Morrison, where did you conduct this evaluation? At Attorney Ramsey's office. Not at a medical facility. And when did this occur? 3 months ago. Interesting. Theodore pulled out papers. Can you show the court your Montana medical license? Morrison went pale. It's in the renewal process. Theodore held up documents. Your Honor, Dr. Morrison has no license to practice in Montana. In fact, this is Albert Morrison, Clifford Ramsey's brother-in-law, with no psychiatric credentials whatsoever. The courtroom erupted, people gasping. The judge banged her gavel 3 times. Mr. Ramsey, explain this. Clifford stammered. Your Honor, I was acting on information provided. Save it. Continue, Mr. Walsh. Theodore called Chester first. The old man walked up slowly, but his voice was strong. I've known Edgar for 4 months. He's one of the sharpest minds I've ever encountered. He built that shelter using engineering principles most young engineers couldn't manage. Clear mind. Sound body. Then Carl. He saved my 7-year-old daughter's life. He organized 16 people in a crisis. He made sound decisions under extreme pressure. If that's crazy, then I wish I could see sanity. Grace Coleman. I've employed Edgar for months. He's reliable, intelligent, and kind. His lifestyle may be unconventional, but so is genius. Then Mildred Thornton walked up to the stand, hands shaking. I insulted this man. I spread lies about him. But now I'll tell the truth. Edgar Brennan is the sanest, most competent person I know, and I'm ashamed I ever said otherwise. I watched this happen. Watched people I'd saved stand up for me. Felt something break open in my chest. At 1 o'clock, Theodore stood. Your Honor, I'd like to call Owen Matthews to the stand. Owen, sitting in the back, stood up reluctantly. I'm not a party to this case. The judge cut him off. Mr. Matthews, get up here now. Owen walked to the stand, sweating. Theodore pulled out papers. Bank statements showing 2 deposits of $5,000 each from Trevor Brennan. Email chain between Trevor, Owen, and Clifford. Timeline showing the payments occurred right before the articles ran. He turned to Owen. Mr. Matthews, did Trevor Brennan pay you $10,000 to write false articles defaming his father? Owen collapsed, his shoulders sagging, his face crumbling. Yes. I needed the money. My daughter has medical bills. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Edgar. No further questions. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Matthews, you'll be dealing with the Montana Bar Association regarding ethics violations. Bailiff, escort him out. Theodore presented everything after that. Albert Morrison being Clifford's brother-in-law. Forged documents, handwriting, expert testimony. The gift of property never happened. No witnesses, no legal records. The entire case built on fabricated evidence. The judge turned to Clifford. Her voice could have cut steel. Mr. Ramsey, did you knowingly use forged documents, false testimony, and conspiracy to deceive this court? Clifford stammered. Your Honor, I was merely representing my client's interests. You'll be reported to the Bar Association. This case is dismissed with prejudice. She turned to me. Mr. Edgar Brennan, your ownership of the land and boxcar remains intact. It is yours legally and rightfully. I apologize for what you've endured. The courtroom cheered, people standing clapping. Carl lifted Hannah so she could see. Grace was crying. Chester grinning. Trevor sat frozen. Brittany had already slipped out through the side door. The courtroom emptied slowly. People congratulated me. Chester patted my shoulder. Grace hugged me and Carl lifted Hannah so she could hug me too. We won, Mr. Edgar. We won. Trevor remained alone in the front row, his head buried in his hands. I walked over and sat beside him, leaving one empty seat between us. We sat in silence for nearly 30 seconds. I don't know what to say, Trevor whispered. Why, son, just tell me why. Brittany said we could sell it, get out of debt. I was weak. I was stupid. I studied him carefully. You were my son. You still are. But trust takes time to rebuild if it can be rebuilt at all. He looked up. I'll leave you alone. You deserve that. I stood, hesitated. I won't pretend everything's fine. It isn't. You tried to take everything I had. But people can change if they truly want to. Tears streamed down his face. Do you think I can? I don't know. That's up to you. I walked away, leaving him alone in the empty courtroom. Spring became summer. Summer became fall. Letters arrived from Trevor, a new address each time. I stacked them unopened. One evening in November, Chester asked, "You gonna forgive him?" "I don't know," I said. "Maybe someday." A week later, there was a knock at my boxcar. Trevor stood there, thinner, humbler, work clothes worn, Brittany gone. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "I just want to show you something." He led me to a small shelter built from recycled materials insulated with a wood stove. A sign read, "Peace House Free Shelter for Those in Need." Inside, a homeless man and woman ate soup, warm and safe. "I've been building this for 3 months," Trevor said softly. "Learning from you. Trying to help people who need it." My throat tightened. "You built this. You taught me." I finally understood what a real man looks like. We sat on the steps. "You hurt me deeply," I said. "I know. But you're trying. That matters. Can we start again? Call me once a week," I said. "We'll start there." He cried, thanking me. I told him I never gave up. I just let him find his way. That evening, Chester said, "That's what heroes do." I returned home older but unbroken, knowing this boxcar life built by my hands was mine. And to you listening to this story, remember this. God doesn't always save us the way we expect. Sometimes He puts us through fire first, through cold, through betrayal, through nights we think we won't survive. But He's always there not to spare us from the storm, but to show us we're stronger than we ever knew. I learned that in a boxcar at 65 years old. Learned it when my own son locked me out in December cold. Learned it when I had to choose between bitterness and building something new. This family story, my family story, isn't unique. Families break. Sons disappoint fathers. Fathers fail sons. It happens every day in every town. What matters is what you do after the breaking. Do you let it destroy you, or do you build something from the ruins? Some of you might be thinking about dad revenge right now. Thinking about someone who wronged you, a father who abandoned you, a son who betrayed you, a family member who took everything, and you want payback. I understand that. God knows I understand that. But here's what I learned. The best dad revenge isn't revenge at all. It's surviving. It's building. It's becoming so undeniably strong that everyone who doubted you has to see what they missed. Trevor tried to destroy me, and instead I saved his life during a blizzard. That wasn't weakness. That was strength. Don't be like I was in those first days, angry, bitter, ready to give up. Don't let other people's cruelty make you cruel. Don't let their smallness make you small. When someone tries to break, you build something so beautiful they can't ignore it. God gave me a second chance in that boxcar. Not because I deserved it. Not because I was special. but because I refused to quit. And he'll do the same for you if you let him. This family story taught me something else, too. Home isn't a place someone gives you. It's something you create with your own hands, your own choices, your own refusal to fall. Trevor took my house, but he couldn't take my ability to build. Nobody can take that from you either. So if you're out there right now, feeling like you've lost everything, your family, your home, your dignity, know this: you haven't lost yourself. And as long as you have yourself, you can rebuild. One board at a time, one choice at a time, one act of courage at a time. The ultimate dad revenge living well. Building something that matters. Proving that their rejection couldn't destroy you. And forgiving them when they finally understand what they did. If this family story moved you, if you've ever felt abandoned or betrayed, if you've ever had to rebuild from nothing, leave a comment below. Share your story. You never know who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories like this, real stories about real people facing impossible odds, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. These stories matter. Your story matters. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Thank you for listening to an old man talk about a boxcar, a blizzard, and a second chance. And a warning before you go: the stories that follow may contain some fictional elements constructed for educational purposes. If you prefer different content, feel free to explore other options that suit you better. But if you're ready for more truth, more courage, more stories about people who refuse to quit, stick around. I'll see you in the next one. God bless.